For as long as I can remember, my family's dynamics have been a constant source of pain and frustration. From the very beginning, I was always overshadowed by my younger brother, the golden child who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. No matter how hard I worked or how much I achieved, my accomplishments were always dismissed, while his every move was celebrated. But it wasn't just about favoritism, it was sabotage. When I decided to start my own business, my brother pulled strings behind my back, manipulating our parents into withdrawing their support at the last minute. All the work I had poured into building something from the ground up was undone in an instant by his twisted plot. It felt like a devastating betrayal, and I couldn't understand how they could stand by him, knowing the harm he was causing me. They chose him over me, over and over again, until I was left to fend for myself. Despite their betrayal, I still found a way to make my business successful. I didn't need their help, and as I grew stronger, I realized just how little they truly mattered in my life. But the pain never fully disappeared, and the resentment festered inside me. I tried to hold on to the idea of family, the small moments of happiness we once shared, but it all felt like a hollow lie. Eventually, I had enough. I cut all ties. I blocked them, hoping for peace, but deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before they come back into my life. And when they did, it would be nothing like I imagined. The clash, the anger, the hatred, it was all building up to something that would explode. After cutting ties with my family, I thought I was finally free. But the nightmare was far from over. Just when I thought I could live my life without their toxic influence, my parents showed up uninvited at my apartment. Their arrival was a calculated move, a desperate attempt to insert themselves back into my life, as if nothing had happened. They came with smiles and empty words, as though the years of neglect, betrayal, and emotional abuse were all forgotten. They wanted to invest in my business, to make things right, but I knew better. Their motives were never genuine. I had watched them tear me down my entire life, and now they wanted to come crawling back for a piece of my success. I couldn't stand the hypocrisy. I refused to let them back into my life, not when they had shown me nothing but contempt for all these years. The anger inside me reached its breaking point. I told them to leave, to get out of my apartment and never return. They didn't listen. I repeated myself, more firmly this time, but they refused to understand. As they began to push back against my request, I snapped. I couldn't take it anymore. I physically removed them from my apartment, using all the strength I had, both emotional and physical. I was done. The feeling of pushing them out, of slamming the door behind them, was a release I hadn't known I needed. But as I closed that door, I didn't expect what would happen next. A few hours later, my brother called, furious. He was threatening to sue me, claiming I'd harmed our parents. His words were venomous, accusing me of treating the people who had raised me with cruelty. It was absurd. I hadn't hurt them, not physically, but his anger was a reflection of the warped loyalty he had toward them. The situation was escalating into a full-blown family war, and I was caught right in the middle. The aftermath of that night was nothing short of a nightmare. The anger from my brother and my relatives intensified with every passing hour. They launched a full-scale campaign against me online, spreading lies, accusing me of being a horrible daughter, and blaming me for hurting our parents. It was maddening. For a moment, I even considered apologizing just to make it stop, to put an end to the constant barrage of hate and accusations. I thought if I apologized, they might back off. But then I remembered something that stopped me cold. Apologizing would only give them ammunition to use against me. It could be twisted into an admission of guilt, and that would make it easier for them to follow through with their lawsuit. I wasn't about to give them that power. In the days that followed, I confided in my partner. He was the one who helped me see reason. He told me to ignore them, to not let their petty drama affect my life. They'll move on when they realize you won't engage with them, he said, and I believed him. My life had been peaceful without them, and I couldn't let their toxic presence ruin what I had built for myself. So I did what I had to do. I blocked them all. I blocked my parents, my brother, and anyone who was involved in their hateful campaign. It was a harsh decision, but it was the only way to protect my sanity and my future. Meanwhile, I took a closer look at my brother. A part of me was curious about what he had been doing since I cut him out of my life. I learned from some mutual friends that he was still working for my father's company, stuck in the same position for years. It was almost comical. Now that the company was being acquired, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen to him. It seemed like karma was finally catching up with him. Weeks passed, and the storm that my family had created finally began to settle. The relentless attacks from my relatives dwindled as they realized that I wasn't going to give in. They'd expected an apology, a sign of weakness they could exploit, but they got nothing. My silence, however, was more powerful than any words could have been. Slowly, they stopped, realizing that they had no hold over me anymore. It wasn't just about ignoring them. It was about making it clear that I was done with the manipulation, done with the drama, and done with their toxic presence in my life. They were just background noise now. As time went on, I started to focus on my future, on my business, and on building a life I could be proud of. My company had flourished without their interference, and I was only growing stronger. The thought of them, once so central in my life, now barely crossed my mind. But then, something interesting happened. I heard news through a friend that my father's company had been acquired. I wasn't exactly thrilled, but I was curious to see how it would affect my brother. After all, he was still stuck in that same dead-end job that had been handed to him because of my father's connections. I didn't even think he had the competence to hold a real position on his own. It was ironic, really. After everything my brother had done to sabotage me, I couldn't help but feel a little satisfaction knowing that his future was uncertain. My dad's company was changing, and with it, my brother's job was at risk. I didn't wish him ill, but it felt like the universe was finally giving him a taste of his own medicine. Meanwhile, I was thriving stronger, more successful than ever, and I had absolutely no intention of letting them back into my life. As time went on, I began to breathe a little easier, free from the constant barrage of hatred and judgment from my family. It felt almost surreal to have a quiet life where my energy was no longer drained by their drama. Still, I couldn't shake the bitterness of everything that had happened, the years of emotional strain and betrayal. It wasn't something that could be forgotten easily. The wounds ran deep, and no amount of time could erase them. My family had shown me their true colors, and I wasn't about to let them back into my life. However, just when I thought the storm had passed, a small yet telling ripple emerged. My brother had reached out to me again, this time from an unknown number. I had blocked him years ago after the last blow-up, but there he was, trying to make contact. Curiosity got the better of me, so I asked a few of my old friends about him. They told me he was still working under my father, stuck in the same unremarkable position he'd been in for years. The thought of him still lingering in that dead-end job felt almost pathetic to me, especially after everything he'd done to sabotage me. It was clear that his life hadn't moved forward, but mine had skyrocketed. And then I heard a piece of news that made my stomach churn with an odd sense of satisfaction. My father's company was about to be acquired. The news spread fast, and it wasn't lost on me that this meant my brother's position was likely in jeopardy. It was almost poetic justice. The same person who had once tried to ruin my life was now staring at the potential collapse of his own. I couldn't help but feel a little thrill at the idea of him facing the consequences of his actions, even if I didn't want to admit it. For once, the tables had turned. Weeks went by, and the dust finally seemed to settle. My family's anger slowly fizzled out as they realized I wasn't going to fold under the pressure. The online hate campaign against me died down once they saw I wouldn't engage with it. My parents and brother stopped reaching out, probably because they understood I wasn't apologizing, nor would I ever. The fear of a lawsuit still loomed in the background, but it no longer kept me up at night. In fact, the longer this dragged on, the more absurd it all seemed. I had done nothing wrong, and their constant attempts to villainize me only showed their desperation. Meanwhile, my life had only grown more fulfilling. My business was flourishing, and my personal life had become a peaceful sanctuary, free from the toxic chaos my family brought. I was no longer bound by the need to seek approval from people who had never truly supported me. My boyfriend and I were thriving together, our relationship growing stronger every day. We even started talking about marriage, something that felt like a distant dream just a few years ago. But even as I moved on, my thoughts sometimes drifted back to the twisted games my family had played. My brother, still stuck in his dead-end job, had recently suffered the consequences of the company acquisition. I couldn't help but feel an unspoken satisfaction, knowing that he might finally get a taste of what it felt like to lose. Maybe it was wrong to feel this way, but after everything he did to destroy my dreams, a small part of me was enjoying watching him unravel. I had worked so hard to get to where I was, and the idea of him failing at his own game felt like sweet karmic justice. As months passed, the peace I had fought so hard to preserve seemed more solid. My decision to cut ties with my family had finally brought the serenity I craved. The chaos they once brought into my life was now a distant memory, and every day felt like a small victory. Even the constant threats from my brother seemed laughable at this point. His desperation, though childish, only made me more resolute in my choice to sever all ties. His inability to move forward, both in his career and his personal vendettas, felt like a reflection of the path my family had taken in their endless favoritism and manipulation. I had built my empire from nothing, all while being torn down by those who were supposed to support me. Yet here I was successful, happy, and free. My boyfriend and I had begun to plan our future, and the wedding was becoming a reality. I didn't need their approval or their money to achieve my dreams. My parents had burned their bridges, and I had no intention of rebuilding them. As my business expanded and my life flourished, I realized just how much strength I had gained. I was no longer the same person who had once sought their validation. Time continued to pass, and as I focused on my growing business and future with my partner, I could see how far I had come. The threats from my family had quieted down, and their attempts to drag me back into their toxic web had failed. The hate campaign they once waged against me had lost its steam, and I remained unbothered. I knew they would never change, but I had grown beyond needing their approval. Every milestone I reached, every success I achieved, felt even sweeter knowing it was all because of my own hard work and resilience, no thanks to them.